Good afternoon and welcome to today's FS Club webinar, Purpose-Led Business, Models for the 21st Century. In a world where profit maximisation often takes centre stage, this afternoon we're exploring alternative business models where purpose transcends mere financial gains. We'll be discussing innovative strategies, ethical frameworks and real-world examples that demonstrate how purpose-driven organisations can create positive social impact while achieving sustainable economic success. Our esteemed speakers this afternoon are Andrew Kaufmann, founder of the Time to Give Network, and Annika Schneider, International Partnerships Lead at Purpose. Andrew has over 25 years' experience in finance and technology in both London and New York. He founded the Time to Give Network as a powerful platform to accelerate personal and business development goals in return for charitable donations. The not-for-profit network supports market research activities and provides expert assistance and mentoring. Secondly, as a business graduate, Annika Schneider experienced an economic system that prioritises profit above all else, where employees are regarded as interchangeable resources and founders are only successful if they reach astronomical wealth through an exit. Wanting to commit to an economy that works for people and planet, Annika joined Purpose in 2019, and Purpose is a network of organisations that serve a global community of entrepreneurs, investors and citizens. Their mission is to make steward ownership and alternative financing accessible to entrepreneurs, investors and lawyers all over the world. Before I hand over to Annika, we have a few basic housekeeping rules for everyone. So the session will be recorded and available to watch on our website within 48 hours, and we'll be holding a Q&A session after the presentation. So if you use the GoToWebinar chat facility to send your questions to me, I can feed them into the conversation. And for those who haven't met me virtually or in person before, I'm Charlotte Dorr-Brashley and I manage the FS Club at CN. I'd like to warmly acknowledge our very generous sponsors who enable us to continue to bring you a wide range of thought-provoking content across finance, technology and economics. Now, we have a few poll questions as a bit of a sense check first this morning. So we'll do those before I hand over. So you should just be able to answer the poll question on your computer now. So who has heard of steward ownership companies? Yes or no? Just keep that up for a while to allow more people to answer, and then we'll go on to the next one. Okay, just leave that for a little bit longer. Right, okay, I think we'll see the result of that one. Okay, so 56 of people have and 44% haven't, so definitely a large percentage will be learning something today, which is good. Second question, who's heard of community interest companies? That one might be a little bit less common. Let's see. Okay. I'll just leave that for a moment longer, and if we can see the results for that one. So 80% have heard of that and 20% haven't. Interesting. And last one. So I think we're ready to go through to the presentation now. So it's my pleasure to hand over to you, Annika.
Perfect, thank you. Let me just start my presentation. Now you should be able to see it, right? I was actually quite happy that more than half of you have heard of steward ownership. Let me think. If we talk about steward ownership, it's always the question, okay, where do we start? Where is kind of the common ground for all us to move into this whole field of ownership, right? And in order to do that today, I thought I'll tell you about my weekend, because I went last weekend to visit to meet with my friends from school. 20 years back, we were in school together, and since 20 years, of course, as it goes, everyone took a different path. So one of my friends is a police officer, one is a psychologist in a prison, and so it was very difficult for me to say, they always asking me, what is actually steward ownership? What are you doing? To find the words, to find the narratives, to explain steward ownership to people who have nothing to do with business in that sense. And I'm going to use the same approach, because I think it's I like it actually. If you open up a newspaper in the morning and you look at any article in the business section, you can probably find two principles in there, like kind of two paradigms that overarch, that dominate our economies. First one, money buys power, right? If Elon Musk buys Twitter, now X, he has a lot of money and he's buying a lot of power. Second paradigm is that most companies exist to maximize shareholder value. And these two paradigms, they are like a circle. They like kind of strengthen each other, but they also really are dominating each other. Now, if I look around in our current world, we really see lots of consequences that these two principles, that this paradigm of economics has on our life, right? We have climate change, we have an insane rise in inequality, we have a very, very high concentration of money and power, and this threatens the base of our existence, right? So we're at Purpose, we're wondering what we can do about this, right? How can we change these overarching principles? How can we have an effect to decrease the effect that these consequences have? And in our opinion, we need to look at something quite unsexy, something quite invisible, namely at ownership. Why is that? Ownership, in our opinion, is the deep design of every company. It's the operating system, it's invisible, but it is affecting every management decision, every layer of decision making in a company. Now, it's not enough to tame companies, to give them rules and give them guidelines that kind of, you know, change the symptoms of the outcome, but we need to look at the lever, the underlying system, and rethink it. And lots of entrepreneurs out there, as Andrew, who we're going to listen to in a few minutes, are rethinking ownership. They say the current system is somehow broken, somewhat not fitting to our values, to our ideas of entrepreneurship, and we want to rethink it. And so what do? I'll quickly explain this because this is a great understanding of why Andrew came up with what he came up with. If you think about ownership, and again about these principles, you see that ownership consists of two sorts of rights. We have power and we have money. Power meaning who makes decisions in a company, money meaning who values from the money of a company, from the benefits it makes. And then again, if you look at Elon Musk buying Twitter, you see that this ownership rights that are actually separate, they bundle together, right? They bundled as one. Elon Musk puts money on the table, and in return, he gets this bundle of ownership rights. Now, people like Andrew don't want to follow this rationale anymore. They say this is not fitting my values. So what do? First, they unbundle the bundle. They split apart these two different rights. They say a share is no longer both together, but instead it consists of voting rights and it consists of economic rights. And then they redesign these principles that I said in the beginning according to their own values, to their own needs. First, the first principle, instead of saying money buys power, they say our companies are self-determined, meaning power can no longer be bought, can no longer be speculated with, but instead it's held by the people who are closely connected to the company and who really understand its mission and its values. Secondly, instead of saying the purpose of the company is to create shareholder value, they say that the value can no longer be extracted. Instead, profits are reinvested in the company. They're used to cover capital costs, or they can be donated. So these are kind of the two new principles of entrepreneurship with the entrepreneurs that we work with. Now, if I founded a company, I could, of course, live these principles. I could tell everyone about them. I could write them on my walls, but I need to find a way to lock them in so that, you know, if I run in front of a bus tomorrow, no one can come and change these principles again and kind of dissolve everything that I have built so far. So if someone asks you tomorrow, what is steward ownership? You can say it's two new principles and they locked in for perpetuity. That's what we call steward ownership. Now, this sounds super technocratic and this sounds like, oh God, this is just made up for a few entrepreneurs. But if you look back, this is a concept that has been inspired historically by many forerunners. John Lewis in the UK, we have a lot of Danish foundation companies, some German foundation companies who have already thought of this sort of ownership over 100 years ago. And they did this for a long time, but what was missing was a shared language, right? A shared understanding of what are these companies doing differently than other companies. And that's where Purpose came in. Around 10 years ago, we studied these entrepreneurs, these companies. We coined this term, steward ownership, And then we built narratives around it, and we looked into what do these companies do differently, and what effect does that have. And so since we did that, a lot of companies have joined the ranks of steward ownership. There are very different companies. If you look at all these logos, you see very small German companies like Einhorn here with the unicorn. It's a condom company from Germany, or the bakery here on the left side, you can see the bread. But there's also very big and not German companies like Patagonia or OpenAI who use a steward ownership structure for their models. And if you want to recluster these companies, not based on size and not based on their country where they're from, you can recluster them along the entrepreneurial need for steward ownership. Why did they choose to do steward ownership? And I did that on this slide. So we have three big groups of motivation to do steward ownership. We have family businesses that say, we want to keep up, we want to maintain what we built up, but maybe the owner is going to retire soon or wants to do something else. They're looking for succession that enables the company to remain value aligned and kind of prevents the company to be sold to a PE fund or a foreign investor. Secondly, in the middle, we have entrepreneurs who already live these principles, but who want to make sure that they are locked in, that the owners can go without losing whatever they built up. Third, we have startups that say, we want to promise from day one to our investors, to our customers, to our employees that we are mission driven and that we will stay independent on the long run. And this is super important because if we don't have these startups that do all of this, we will never have family businesses in 20, 30 years who still exist, because they will be all sold to funds or investors. So if you think about who does steward ownership, it's a very diverse, it's really a very colorful pictures of companies who want to use this structure. Now, Armin, one of our co-founders, was studying in the US at Columbia, and he was researching these companies 10 years ago. And then he was telling his professors about this, and they were like, yeah, that's a great idea. You with your romantic European socialistic ideas. This sounds great on paper, but this is never going to work in real life. So of course, Armin was motivated and triggered, and he started to research if there's data, if there's research studies showing how these companies fare compared to normal or traditionally owned companies. And he found lots and lots of data, because in Denmark, this company form already exists since over 100 years. And I picked out a few. I have lots more if you're interested in this, but I've picked out a few for now. So we don't only see on the external companies perform better, they can take longer term decisions. Therefore, they usually take decisions that are better for the ESG performance, better for nature or the environment in general. But also on the internal, we see a lot of data that shows that these sort of companies, steward-owned companies, are better treating their employees better. Income is usually higher, more secure, less fluctuation in between companies. If someone's happy at work, they're usually also happy at home. So there's even one study showing that the divorce rates of steward-owned employees is lower. And now the latest study was, I think, that the crime rates of employees in steward-owned companies is lower than in traditionally owned companies. So you see, it's a doable concept. It's very successful. The question is, why aren't there more companies doing this? Why is it not more famous? And that's where purpose again comes in. If you look here in the middle, the Purpose Foundation is where I work. It's a nonprofit organization based in Germany, and we coined this term. We developed this concept, and we try to tell everyone on this planet around or about this sort of entrepreneurship and that these companies exist. We have different vehicles with which we do that, because there are lots of reasons in the world why these companies are not more famous. No shared narrative, sometimes a bit of a complex legal infrastructure, and also we need, of course, money, we need capital to finance these companies. So we build a whole network of entities around this. And you saw in the beginning, I'm leading our international partnerships, which means I am connecting with entrepreneurs or change maker organizations around the globe to help them develop the ecosystem in their own countries. If you look closely now, you don't see the UK in the bottom here, which is a big question mark. So if you know anyone or know a change maker organization who could be interested in learning about steward ownership and kind of bringing it to the UK, I would be very, very thrilled to be in touch. Last, I want to end with a quote by one of the entrepreneurs that we work with, Ines, based in Berlin. She invented a tampon made out of seaweed, and she said, "Look, it doesn't really make sense for me to make this amazing product, sustainable on every level, and then take it and then plug this exploitative company structure on top of it, because then whatever I've built is just gonna, destroy." So knowing that there are so many entrepreneurs out there who are mission driven, who are visionary in their own field, I would like to hand over to Andrew, who's going to now tell us a little bit more about his motivation and his company. Andrew.
Thank you, Annika. Thank you. So yeah, as Annika mentioned, I came across an idea that idea was born out of two challenges that I faced personally, and are faced by many others as a result of the research that I've been able to do. And the first challenge that I faced was access, right? Access to the specific people that I want to get in front of, and whether I wanted to gain expertise, whether I wanted to do it for networking, whether I wanted to further my personal and professional career goals, access was key, and access was a challenge that is universal. And I wanted to solve that problem. I also wanted to solve another problem, which was giving back. And to Annika's point, to be able to align a company that is focused on giving back, making it in this structure just made sense, right? For me, I struggled to find an efficient use of my time that would be most impactful, right? I wanted to find a way to support charities that were important to me, but do it in an impactful way. And I found that to be challenging as well. So the question I asked myself was, what can I do to make a difference? And can I do it in a way that is altruistic and not about making lots of money, but rather to do good for the sake of doing good? And that was where the Time to Give Network was born. If you could flip that slide. And there were two reasons here also why I did this. One, again, from a charitable perspective, right? There are no shortage of challenges facing charities, right? As the cost of living crisis continues, we can't expect the general public to give even more than they do today. We can't expect additional funding from government. And traditional fundraising strategies can only go so far. So, and society needs charities to thrive in order for them to fulfill their mission. So unless we innovate, this downward spiral in charitable giving will have a devastating impact on every aspect of human life that relies on charities, whether it's social, environmental, or any other worthy cause that they support. The other aspect is volunteerism, which I try to incorporate into the Time to Give Network model, right? Support for charities via volunteerism is also on the decline. So we at the Time to Give Network focus on corporate volunteerism. In general, volunteerism rates are poor. Most employers don't offer time off for volunteerism or dedicate resources to facilitate volunteerism. For those that do, participation rates are poor, as people either can't or choose not to spend a full day engaging in volunteerism. Many of the volunteer activities are time-based versus skills-based, and it's proven that skills-based volunteerism is just much more impactful. So we at the Time to Give Network asked ourselves, what can we do to encourage and facilitate impactful volunteerism and make it accessible? To do that, we created three innovations. The first is a technology platform, and I'll go into more detail later in the presentation, but I've often referred to the Time to Give Network as the love child of eBay and LinkedIn. So if you can get that visual in your head ahead of the rest of the presentation, I'd appreciate it. As mentioned in the first slide, we're a digital community converting human capital to charitable donations. And the technology platform facilitates valuable business connections and interpersonal connections while delivering a new and unique channel for charitable contributions. You'll also see that I've combined two innovations into one image on the right there. And that's because the operating model and governance are inextricably linked. The unique model we've created ensures that we are business driven by purpose. The Time to Give network will always act with purpose as a result of the steward governance model and the stewards that we've already brought on board who will ensure that. Steward governance also ensures that the Time to Give network remains mission driven without the pressure to enrich shareholders. So what does the Time to Give network tech platform actually deliver, and how does our operating model and governance model work? If you could flip to the next slide, Annika. So there are three parties involved in this model. The first are time givers. A time giver is anyone who wants to give back and is willing to take a meeting in return for a charity that is near and dear to their heart. Many people receive unsolicited interest in meetings, and the reasons for those requests are varied. They can't meet with everybody, as they have no shortage of time constraints from both work and personal obligations. So how do these people ensure that they are making the best use of their most valuable commodity, their time? The second participant are time bidders, and these are individuals who seek access, much like I did during my career in business development. There are many drivers for seeking access, and that includes the desire to benefit from another person's expertise, the need for mentoring, the need to further business development goals, or even just for networking purposes. Historically, obtaining valuable access has no shortage of challenges. It's time consuming, it's costly, and quite often access to these individuals is impossible via conventional means. That's where the Time to Give network comes in. The Time to Give network is a technology platform that allows time givers the opportunity to offer an hour of their time in return for a donation to the time giver's charity of choice. This can be accomplished via auctioning a 1-hour meeting or by leveraging the buy it now mechanism. Just as you might look to sell sports memorabilia on eBay for £30, you can now offer an hour of your time for £300, or whatever donation amount you feel is fair market value for an hour of your time. In this model, the time giver chooses the date, the time, the location of the meeting, as well as the charity and the donation amount. They even choose who they're willing to meet with, so the control is completely in the time giver's hands. This affords them the opportunity to support the third persona in this model, charities. Charities benefit from a new and free revenue stream and receive 100% of the proceeds. They're able to generate donations with little or no effort necessary, certainly when compared to the costs associated with conventional fundraising activities. They can choose to promote participation on the platform from their trustees, their volunteers, their historical donors, in order to leverage this new revenue stream. So let's take a quick look at the operating model and governance now, just because, again, that is an important part of how this model is built. So I'm glad that some people have heard of a community interest model. I have never heard of a community interest model until I did a bit of research. But a community interest company is unique to the UK. There are no dividends, and there is an asset lock, which means no one is building equity and no investors are getting rich. Employees are paid a fair salary, and we're completely transparent as it relates to the cost of running this business. Excess revenue that we generate is donated to charity. Any charities that raise donations via the platform also receive a pro rata distribution of the Time to Give network's excess revenue, and this year-end distribution will further incentivize charities to encourage those trustees and volunteers and individual donors to participate on the Time to Give network platform, because they'll receive that much more at the end of the year. There are challenges. It does necessitate alternative sources of funding. Since community interest companies can't pay dividends, there is some creativity, and I'll highlight that on the next slide as to how we've been able to pull that off. There is an extra, normally KICs don't necessarily need steward governance, but we've added an additional stewardship board to ensure proper governance. To Annika's point, if I was to no longer be part of this organization, I want to make sure that this organization stays on mission throughout its life. One of the questions that people often ask is, why do you do it this way? Why wouldn't you just take investors and do it the conventional way? And there's a number of reasons. One is it just feels right, right? Raising money for charity and making money off of that just felt wrong. It just felt like it should be a not-for-profit organization that we launched. Commercially, though, a big part of our value proposition is around corporate and social responsibility. And I spend a lot of time speaking with the heads of corporate and social responsibility organizations. And I felt that it would be a lot easier for the Time to Give network to partner with an organization if we were a not-for-profit. There would just be that much more receptivity because it's not like I'm trying to pitch an idea where somebody's getting rich. And also, our unique selling proposition and why people will want to participate is because we're a not-for-profit venture. And participants take comfort in the fact that we exist solely for the benefit of society. And that will hopefully create some great uptake as it relates to growing this network that already exists today. So how will the Time to Give network be able to fulfill our mission? Well, with the support of people like you and people that you know that might be willing to be interested or are interested in participating in this type of activity, whether it's as a time bidder or as a time giver. And then the second piece of the puzzle, as far as how we're going to fulfill our mission, is funding. So if you could go to that next slide, I will show you this slick video or slick animation. So, leveraged philanthropy, also called philanthropic gearing, which is why I have those gears in the middle there. So in this model, as the Time to Give network is able to raise funds from time bidders, from sponsors, from those who are willing to offer patient capital loans, the impact of that money allows us to then raise that much more money for charity, and it just continues to grow and grow. The model that we've created, time in return for access, is universal. Our initial focus is around the UK financial services market, but this works just as well in Singapore as it would in the pharmaceuticals business. As we are able to raise more funds, the impact of those funds not only directly allows us to raise more money for charity now, but also on an ongoing basis. So that's the best part of this, is that as this grows, we're able to raise more money for charity, facilitate that many more valuable connections, and there's just no losers in this model. In my mind, every day that the Time to Give network isn't running at maximum capacity is a lost opportunity for charitable donations, which is why I and the rest of the team are out there looking to continue to build this network, hit that critical mass, and then release it to the world. Last slide. Sorry. So, as mentioned, how to support not only the Time to Give network, but all steward-owned community interest companies. Because in speaking with Annika, there are other organizations that, there's one that donates all their excess revenue to planting trees, right? So these types of things are important. And these types of organizations are important. So in order to be able to do that, I feel like I'm second degree connected from everybody I need to know, right? I was introduced to my Lord Mayor by a connection of mine, and that relationship has ended up being incredibly impactful. And I'm here today. And the Lord Mayor has also offered to participate on this platform as well. So whether it is this group or those who you may know who may be philanthropically inclined or looking for a new way to get involved and make a difference, we'd welcome you. And that's it.
Thank you so much. Andrew and Annika. That was fascinating. Did we have, sorry, Annika, did you have a few more things to add before we move to Q&A?
Yeah, maybe just one thought that came up while Andrew was presenting. Thanks, Andrew. Super interesting, especially from this German perspective of knowing very little about community interest companies, because it's a very unique sort of legal form for these sort of companies. I just want to point out again, if we talk about steward ownership, Andrew is one example, but it's if you put all of these companies on on a matrix, Andrew would be one very philanthropic, would be on the philanthropic side, and a lot of other companies would be somewhere in between, because that's something that's valid for community interest companies is you cannot give out equity. For other companies using other forms, this of course available. So we work with companies that have normal investors, normal equity-based investments. They just always adhere to these two principles. So I would kind of like to point out the thing that connects everyone are these two principles and this asset lock. And I think Andrew has a very convincing, very beautiful example of a very philanthropic endeavor. So
Yeah, fantastic.
I'm very curious if there's any questions.
Thank you. So I would say I was really impressed by, Annika, when you had the list of companies. There are a lot of international brands there that are really sort of trusted by consumers, and I think that comes into it as well. But on that note, however, Trevor has asked, he said, OpenAI appears to be a governance mess. Why is that? And does this relate to co-ops? How does it relate to co-ops?
Yeah. So I'll answer both parts separately. So OpenAI is officially a steward-owned company under our understanding of steward ownership. We ran a whole case study on them because we were so intrigued by the governance that they built, and then the governance that completely failed them. And what we kind of learned, or what we took out of this case as a learning, was they built this governance beautifully. They had a board that was taking over the voting power, and then they had another board taking over the dividend rights. So it was perfect separation of money and power. However, those two boards apparently didn't communicate well with each other, and they ran into different directions. So we would call it that the stewardship was not filled with life. And we're wondering, okay, what can you do if you build this construction? Let's say what Andrew built there. What do you need in addition? Processes, clear roles, very clear communication to fill this construction with life. So we're still hoping that in 10 years, we're going to look back and say OpenAI is an amazing example for a very well functioning governance, but time will hopefully tell us. But we did see that after it failed, what they did now, for instance, do is they gave investors I think they call it a visiting chair or visiting insights into the company, which is a good way in the right direction, because it means they include stakeholders without giving them official voting rights, and they include the needs and the wishes of all different sorts of stakeholders. Second question about the cooperatives. I think it depends a bit on the country, but for Germany, what's true is cooperatives have a similar thought under it. However, they don't fully fulfill the two principles. Namely, in a cooperative, you have one person, one vote. That's very unflexible. If you want a company like Andrew's company, where maybe one person holds the voting rights until in 5 years, and then maybe two people hold the voting rights, you can structure it much more flexibly, which often enables entrepreneurs to be more flexible. Secondly, in a cooperative, if all the cooperative members come together, they can still sell the company for profits. And that's what happened to a few very large cooperatives in the world. There's one cooperative from the US, I think 70,000 cooperative members. The owner had decided to give it to their employees. One generation was very proud and very excited. Next generation was thinking, this is really cool to be a cooperative member. Third generation thought, I really need a new house. So they came together, they sold the company for a profit. And then everything that this company had built, all the value that had been built up, all the mission alignment that had been there was sold. So cooperatives are similar field, different design, I would say.
Thank you. Now, Shane has said the benefits of being a not-for-profit organisation are clear, with many being more open to participating. But have there been any limitations by using this model?
Yeah, there's a lot of limitations in the current status of this world because very little people know about this. And most people who hear about this say, oh, this is interesting. I've never thought about this. Some people say, I've thought about this, but I didn't know some other people were as crazy as to think about this. So we're saying there's a lack of narrative, lack of languages. If you open the newspaper, you only read about unicorns and exits, and you don't read about entrepreneurs like Andrew who are trying to build a really sustainable, really mission-driven company. So we're building narratives. Secondly, in most countries, there is no legal form for this. So in Germany, there is no legal form for this. That's why there's a big foundation that is lobbying for a new political form. And so if someone tomorrow texts me from Nigeria and the next day from Australia, we have to find lawyers to figure out a model that works. In the UK, you can use a community interest company, but it's very narrow in what it allows. So again, it would be better if there was another legal form at the side. Third problem is there's no capital available. Many investors cannot invest in a company like this simply because they have certain return timeframes. They need the money back after 5 years, which often doesn't work for steward-owned investments, or they have to have maxed returns or a possible exit to pay out investors, and that also doesn't work in the logic of steward ownership. However, with our work, with our non-profit organization, we are trying to figure out how to do it. And we are trying to find investors who say, okay, I'm open to this. I actually want to be more value aligned when I invest. And also we want to prove that these sort of investments are actually as profitable as other investments, just on a different scale and on a different risk level. So lots of work for us.
Yeah, you're doing well, thank you. I guess this kind of relates to that. So David has said, to what extent are cultural issues at play? It seemed that you had a lot of those companies were European as opposed to the UK, quite a few American.
Yeah, it's a very good point. It's a very good question. It's super interesting because we do get interest and requests from every part of this world. We had people from Bhutan, we had people from Nigeria texting us or contacting us to figure out a way for their countries. It's right now, of course, driven by Western entrepreneurs, Western companies who, let's say, are in a luxurious position to think about things like this. However, I think it's a concept that really applies to every culture, and it always changes a little bit because, for instance, with the person from Bhutan, we were discussing amazing concept, but it would be weird to use a legal form that doesn't exist yet. So the question is, how can you lock in these principles in a country where there's no institutions or where there's failed institutions? So then we were thinking, okay, maybe there's a community who could kind of veto what the company is doing, or kind of protect what the company is doing. And so I would say right now we're at the start of figuring out how this changes to cultural perceptions, but I think it's going to be a big thing in the future because it's really driven by the people in the countries to understand it.
That's really interesting. Thank you. And Andrew, so you were saying the Time to Give network, it's not live at the moment, is that correct?
So it is live. The platform is built, and we have many people signed up. In fact, we just recently had an official engagement today, where someone from a chief information officer from a fund administrator in South Africa was up in the UK taking meetings. He thought he'd like to take an hour out of his time to raise some money for charity. And we connected him with the head of sales at a technology shop, and they had a meeting at 10:30 this morning. So it is up and running. It's just very new, but we are still growing that universe of participants. Yeah, but it is in production.
And can you so you don't just have to be in the UK to participate at the moment?
So no, I mean and it's funny, I talked about second degree connections. So there's a gentleman named Leon Cooperman, who's a legend in the asset management world. And he's also my oldest business connection because he raised his family down the block from me in New Jersey. So he's up on the platform now. He's quite happy to take a meeting, whether it's in the US or via Zoom. The focus is on the UK just because at the outset we needed some sort of a general focus, but certainly with the advent of Zoom, it can happen anywhere. And as mentioned, whether it's someone flying into the UK to take a meeting or someone trying to sell into the UK to fill their diary, they can take those meetings in the UK. The plan now is to have a launch in the US in Q4. But given how natural this model is and the fact that it can spin itself up in other locations quite easily, still running it through the community interest company here in order to maintain that structure. But the aspirations are certainly global. But the initial focus now, the predominant focus now, as we're really getting up and running, it has been in the UK.
Right.
So
And I
anybody
guess,
who's interested, come
yeah.
on board.
Well, yeah, and I guess people who are, if you're in Asia or Pacific and you're looking to set up and expand into the UK, it's a perfect opportunity to use something like this as well and meet with experienced people over Zoom, which is
Oh
great.
yeah, absolutely. I was speaking with the owner of a company, again, coincidentally in South Africa, who was thinking about starting up here, and I connected him with someone who was especially well connected that he would gain benefit of. He liked the fact that he was getting that expertise. He was happy to make a charitable donation. The person offering that advice was happy to generate money for a charity that was near and dear to his heart. So yeah, so whether it's research, whether it's sales, whether it's marketing, whether it's networking, it could eventually be a sports celebrity, right? Who, a sports hero who comes on, and this is the vehicle by which he or she is offering their time to either at a set price or auctioning their time.
Or like,
The
an
model,
author or
the
something
model is
like
actually based on the Warren Buffett lunch model, where Warren Buffett for 10 years, auctioned a lunch on eBay, and he raised over $50 million for a charity called Glide. And my argument is that everybody's time has intrinsic value. So whether it's Warren Buffett and a master of the universe or some mid-level manager, if their time is solicited, then there's a market. And if there's a market, then there's an opportunity.
And with the charities, does it just have to be at this stage a registered charity in the UK?
Right now, on an automated basis, any charity that is part of the Just Giving network, so we have a
Mhm.
connection to the Just Giving network, so we're really just a broker, right? So we are bringing people together, but the actual donation doesn't happen through the Time to Give network. It happens via the Just Giving pipe. So any charity on Just Giving can have an automated solution, or we have workarounds if it's outside.
Great. Now, Antonio said thank you to you both for a very informative, educational, and thought-provoking discussion. Andrew, for you, he's asking, does this charitable model exist? You said what it was based on, but does this model exist already elsewhere?
Not that I know of. There's only one other platform in the US that does it. They do it differently. They're not necessarily focused on interpersonal meetings. They'll auction off like experiences and things like that. The other downside to their model, which is again something that we wanted to focus on, was in their model they charge the charities 20% of the fees. And in the Time
Mm.
to Give network model, the charities get their money for free. So again, we don't need to take a lot of money out of this. Our run rates are relatively low. We have a great team of volunteers and interns and all sorts that are helping to pitch in to bring this thing to life. But this is unique in our specific model and certainly in the Kick model, which enshrines how we do what we do and ensures that we can't deviate from this path, even if we wanted to.
That's great. Yeah, I've never heard of it's a fantastic thing. There's so many people, especially looking to start their first business. They don't have access to the people who have the knowledge. They wouldn't even know where to go. And I think that will make a huge difference.
Yes.
We are out of time, but Andrew and Annika have kindly offered to answer further questions, and they're happy for you to email them directly. We'll post those in the chat now. So thank you very much to both of you for sharing your time and work with us today. They're both really fantastic, meaningful initiatives. I'm sure we'll hear more about them, and I look forward to following the progress. Also, thank you to our sponsors, of course, for making these webinars possible, and for everyone for logging in and contributing to the discussions. Don't forget to check out our website for forthcoming events. We've got more diverse lectures coming up, including as part of our Knowledge Mile series. And if you are on LinkedIn, you can follow us at Z-YEN Group Limited for more recent updates. And if you're keen to come along to an event in person and meet us, we are hosting a city walk on the 25th of June, and we'll pop the link to that in the chat as well. So thanks again, everyone, and enjoy the rest of your week.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye.